Hi folks, my name is Dennis and I recently built this assembly table and I thought there might be an interest in how that build came together. I've always done any woodworking projects either on the garage floor or on a piece of plywood on sawhorses, and after many years of doing that I decided to build a mobile table with a nice large top and plenty of drawers. So I came up with a design, went off to Lowe's to buy some lumber, and got to work. I started by breaking down the lumber for the frame. I used 4x4s for the legs, 2x4s for the rails and supports, 3/4 inch plywood for the top and a lower shelf, and I covered the top with 1/4 inch hardboard. And here's the lumber for the base frame cut to size. I use pocket holes for just about everything in the build. They're easy to use, fast, and plenty strong for this application. I'm using a Hole Jig that I've had for years and it's still doing the job. Since I'm using 2x4s, I made sure to adjust my jig and drill setting for 1.5 inch stock, which is the thickness of a 2x4. Now the rest here is pretty repetitive, so I'll speed this up a bit so you don't have to watch this in real time. And many times I'll hook up the vacuum to the Hole Jig to keep the jig itself clear of dust and chips, as well as the surrounding area. I didn't have a Hole clamp big enough to get around the 4x4, so constructing the base was a little bit of a challenge due to the length of the table and the uneven garage floor, so I was alternating between the floor and the table depending upon what was more convenient. And in addition to adjusting the Hole Jig and drill setting to deal with 2x material, I'm also using 2.5 inch pocket screws, which are the recommended screw size to use with 2x material. I wanted the table to be mobile and installed a heavy-duty set of casters that I purchased from Lee Valley many years ago and never used, and they're working out just great. And after all that, we've got a basic frame for the assembly table. I wanted to really make the table very solid and sturdy, so I decided to add 2x4 supports between the long upper and lower rails. And using the Kreg right angle clamp is great for holding the pieces of wood securely while fastening. I wanted to use the bottom of the table to house several banks of drawers, so I cut down a 3/4 sheet of plywood to fill the lower portion of the table. I'm using the TSO product parallel guide and have to say that all the cuts made with that guide were right on and would definitely recommend checking out their products. To make a clean 90-degree cut on the plywood, I'm using another TSO product, the guide rail square, and you can hardly see it, but it's attached to the festal guide on the end that's closest to my body. That's used with the parallel guides as well, and it really gives a true 90-degree cut. And I'm not being sponsored by TSO products in any way. I purchased a product based upon recommendations. They're not cheap, but they do the job. For the piece I just cut, I had to make a small cutout on each corner to fit the plywood around the legs for the lower portion of the table. And I just used my jigsaw to do that. After laying the plywood in place, I marked the location of the supports under the plywood to make it a little easier to fasten the plywood to the supports below it. And then I just fastened the plywood to the supports using pocket screws. I finished attaching the supporting 2x4s between the long rails and then began breaking down the plywood that I used as partitions for the vertical bays that house the drawers. You'll see I'm using a festival saw. I think it's a TS55 and it's easily over a decade old and it still seems to be going strong. I purchased a new blade for this project and it did a nice job giving me nice clean cuts. I used a Bosch portable table saw where appropriate, but I found that the combination of the Festool guide, the TSO products, and the dust control provided by the Festool vacuum gave me what I needed to best break down the plywood most of the time. And there's the progress so far. We've got a basic frame, top and bottom supports, the lower plywood base, and the partitions for the drawers. Time to start making draw boxes. I made the draw boxes using 3/4 inch plywood for the front, sides, and back, and I used 1/4 inch plywood for the bottom. I used pocket screws to fasten the front, sides, and back, and used glue and brads to fasten the draw bottom. My design contained different draw sizes. The largest bank contained 2 draw boxes at 9.5 inches each, and the smallest bank contained 4 draw boxes at 4 inches each, with a few different sizes in between. I tried out this Craig guide to help with the installation of the draw slides. Here I was installing draw slides from the bottom up, and that turned out to be okay since there was enough clearance between the slides. That didn't work with the smaller draw boxes as there wasn't enough clearance between the slides. For those, I had to install the slides from the top down, which I eventually settled on as a way to install all the other draw slides. So that I didn't have to separate the slide to fasten it to the box, I'm just pulling it out a small distance to fasten the front of the slide to the box while keeping the draw aligned with the slide. I pulled it out a little further to fasten both at the midpoint and a little further to fasten at the back, although that's not shown here. Here's the short stack of drawers I mentioned earlier, and now I'm attaching the drawer fronts to the boxes to give the drawer a more finished look. I'm using 1/8 inch spacers to give me the separation I wanted between the drawer fronts and on the side, and I'm just using brads to temporarily hold the drawer fronts in place. Once the drawer fronts were temporarily fastened, I went back and attached the drawer boxes to the drawer fronts with screws from the inside. I don't know why I kept taking out the drawers, but I guess at the time it seemed like a good idea. And that's one side of the table complete with drawers. I used this Craig jig to position holes for the drawer handles. It really made the job go very fast and very smoothly. The screws that came with the handles were too short to get through 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood, so I purchased longer screws. Another option is to countersink the inside of the drill hole to achieve the distance needed to use shorter screws. I'm not sure what happened here, but what you were supposed to be seeing was me breaking down a sheet of plywood for the top and layering a 1/4 inch sheet of hardboard over it. And you can see the result here. I decided to surround the top with 1x2 lumber just to give the edges a clean look. And here's the finished product. The final measurements of the top was just about at 8 feet long and 4 feet wide. I left an overhang of about 15 inches on one end, and I thought I would put a stool there and use it as a place to do some drawing and design work. Having it on casters to move it when needed is great. It's extremely sturdy, but it's also extremely heavy. I tried to match the plywood grain in each of the draw banks, and I like the way that looks. I'm not sure if I'll try to finish it in any way, but I'm open to suggestions if you have any. It's my first real assembly table, and I'm happy the way it turned out. I hope this was helpful and informative to those who might be considering building an assembly table of their own. And if you like what you saw, give me a thumbs up, and I'd be interested in your comments as well. More videos are on the way as I try to transform my garage into a decent place to do some woodworking. If you want to be notified when a new video is posted, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.